Welcome, everybody, to my lecture on hypnosis today. I trust you've been having a good time at the convention so far, and today we will be discussing the hypnoticism of mundane objects. And before any of you smartasses in the audience object, no, hypnoticism is not a real word. I made it up because it sounds a bit more academic than hypnoticness. But saying hypnotic potential sounds a bit too scientific for what we're about to do, because really, what we're gonna do in the coming half hour is a whole lot of navel gazing. But the fun kind. The kind of gazing that makes your eyelids slowly grow heavier and heavier as your focus is pulled entirely onto the subject of discussion. And that brings me to my first major point, visual fixation. Now, we all know that although hypnosis is typically induced through sound or through at least the comprehension of words, be it through text or speaking, there is a major visual component to, well, most hypnosis. For instance, consider all of the essential hypnotic cliches and tropes. The pocket watch, the spiral, the eyes. These all have one very major running theme amongst them. They are all centered around visual fixation. You stare deep into the spiral. As it swirls and swirls, you watch the pocket watch sway back and forth, and your eyes have to move to follow it, whereas a spiral is moving, but your eyes stay still, and another person's eyes, on the other hand, also remain almost perfectly still, while you also remain still. So we've kind of got these three types of visual fixation and eye motion. Something moving where you stay still, something moving where you move, and something still where you stay still. You may notice something of a pattern. To the best of my knowledge, there does not exist anything major wherein your vision is moving, but the subject is still. That's just not eye fixation, is it? That's more akin to, just kind of looking around in general, isn't it? So, we've got our visual fixation as an essential part of hypnosis when done in person, typically. This can be applied quite broadly once you think about it. There's no reason for you to stare at a pocket watch and not a candle. There's no reason for you to stare at a candle and not a pair of scissors. Because this is an essential component of the my second point, substitution. When approaching anything, you come in with a set of mental frameworks. Schemata, I believe, is how it's officially referred to as. Look, this is the kind of word that I've only ever seen written out and have never actually had to pronounce in the past. Give me a break. So you come into everything with schemata. It's a psychological term that gets applied in various other fields of artistic study. And basically what this means is you come in with an existing set of frameworks and assumptions in regards to, how things work and what things mean. So let's go back to our three hypnotic cliches: pocket watches, spirals, and eyes. All of these have very strong schemata surrounding them. But there's no reason that they cannot be substituted. within the realm of reason. So long as something can fulfill the basic purpose of one of these objects, there's no reason it cannot act as a simple substitute. Take, for example, a pocket watch. There is no reason that you should need to use a pocket watch instead of a necklace with a charm on it. The two are almost completely, interchangeable. That's a very basic example because they fulfill the same basic function. Now, if I may go off on an anecdote for a moment, it's a bit of a shameful one, but we'll get there. There is a limit to how far you can substitute. Having an object on a string does not mean that you have a pocket watch substitute. I remember I would have been about... oh, golly gosh, I want to say I was about 13. I was first exploring... the realm of hypnosis. I was still, very young, obviously. And so one of my friends had agreed to be hypnotized during lunch break, it was probably our recess. And I was like, cool, great. I don't have a pocket watch. And being a 13-year-old boy, I didn't wear a necklace or a bracelet. So what I eventually managed to do was I managed to find some string somewhere, I don't remember where, and we went into the school's library where there was a whole bunch of wheelie chairs, and one of them was broken. One of the wheels had fallen off a wheelie chair. So very, very haphazardly, I tied this piece of string around one of the wheels of the chair and used that as a pendulum substitute. Suffice to say, it didn't work. It did not work at all because it was just a step too far. So one of the big tricks, I think, is when looking into substitutions is to find something that is reasonable and not silly. That's not to say that, hypnotic implements can't be silly. It's just a matter of know what you're doing, first of all. Pick an implement that seems appropriate, second of all. And third is, of course, have good rapport. I was very nervous at the time. I think he was too. That kind of led to rapport going downhill, but that's a completely other story for a completely different lecture. One that I hope to give at the next convention. But you get my point. So obviously you can see how pocket watches can be substituted. What about, spirals? Well, if you've spent any amount of time on Tumblr prior to the Tumblr apocalypse of December 2018, you would have probably seen a whole lot of spirals and spiral variants. Of course, I'm not going to put any of them up on the lecture slides. I wouldn't assail your eyes like that. I don't want any splash damage going off here. But you've seen them. Flashing images, words. There doesn't even need to be something swirling in the middle, so long as it's eye-catching and holds your focus. That is the essential component, next to, of course, suggestibility. If the person looking at it isn't suggestible, if they, of course, lack any form of backing schemata, then, of course, the technique may not work. That's a really essential part of this lecture. You can use anything to hypnotize anyone, so long as that person is open to it, that person is suggestible and understanding of entirely what the hell you're trying to do. In other words, Don't try and hypnotize a stranger on the street with a wheel attached to a piece of string. Only do that to subjects that you have experience and rapport with. And what about eyes? Well, this brings us back to navel gazing, essentially, doesn't it? So long as any object seems to be still and has a way that you can continue looking at it continuously, you are basically on the right track. Might I recommend things that are, well, eyes are typically, enticing even for people without any hypnotic background. They are just lovely things to look into, and they have a certain depth, a certain appeal to them. But for all of those of you who follow my YouTube channel, yes, all 5 of you, you may be familiar with my bottomless bag induction, wherein I have a bag and it just has no bottom, it keeps on falling forever, and as your attention focuses on the bag, as you look at it, your focus gets pulled into it, you get pulled into it, and you slowly find yourself falling down, down, forever, essentially, until, of course, you come out of the bag. That is, well, I had something for this, I swear. That is the crux of it. So long as you can keep on looking without getting bored, like a candle, once again. A candle has that tiniest bit of motion and has that inherent prettiness about it as a little flame atop a wick. It has that inherent trait about it which makes it so easy to just kind of get lost in looking at a candle, a campfire, just anything of that sort of nature. It can be really pleasant, I think. So let's focus on that flicker of the candle for a moment, to that sway of the pocket watch, because that brings me to my third point: gravity and motion. Now, anyone who's spent pretty much any amount of time in hypnosis has probably noticed that we tend to use directional words a lot. A lot. I tried to stop using words like down, deeper, falling, words like that, which indicate some sense of going down to trance and going upwards to wake up. I tried to stop using those. It was really, really bloody hard. And after, I want to say just a few days, I quit. I said, this is a stupid, stupid task, trying not to use these so very potently and evocative words. They're so evocative, so powerful, truly. That, well, gravity is a fundamental force that affects us all. We all understand the innate feeling of falling, of going down, of having weight applied to us. And that is a very, very important hypnotic concept. The idea of, well, I said it at the very start, your eyelids getting heavy, or the feeling of your entire body really getting heavier as you relax. It all happens to us, even normally. You wake up in the morning and you don't want to get up, or maybe physically you cannot get up because your body feels so heavy, so tired. Well, you just can't fight it anymore, can you? So where does that bring us to objects? Well, They say someone can drop with... poor phrasing. Let me restructure that sentence. They say somebody can go into trance with the drop of a hat, quite literally. A sort of sympathetic understanding. You see the hat fall onto the floor, and so too do you fall when commanded. Gravity and motion. If something falls, I believe, and I believe this is Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure reminding me of this fact, but remember Socrates, the sand slipping through the fingers. Well, that can be applied hypnotically, can't it? Your thoughts, every grain of sand. Just imagine for a second. I am holding a handful of sand, and of course I don't want to dirty the convention room, so I'm not actually, but imagine that I am holding, a handful of sand, and every single grain of sand is one of your thoughts. And then I just slowly let these grains of sand slide through my fingers and fall into the wind. How evocative is that? How powerful is that imagery in your head? It's pretty damn cool, right? Gravity, the most fundamental force that none of us can deny. Even flat earthers find themselves going around in loops trying to get past it. So, falling, and once again, motion. I've talked about, the act of falling. What about the act of going side to side? Because side to side is so underutilized in trance. Really, once again, it comes back to pendulums. It comes back to pocket watches. That is really the only time that I have, outside of very specialized Konami code induction, that is the only time that left and right have had any meanings, and I think that that's just a little bit wrong. Because we also have inherent understanding of other directions than up and down. We can also go side to side, forwards and backwards. And I believe that this is purely a hypothetical, experimental, and I'm slightly going off my point, but I think that if we can utilize those directions as well, they can really create a sense of imbalance. And anyone familiar with confusion inductions knows how important, how vital psychological, being thrown off balance, how important that is. But once again, that's pure hypothetical. That's pure speculation. Oh, how are we going for time? Okay. Cool, I've got time for my fourth point, which I didn't really write a smooth transition into, so just bear with me here. My fourth point is attached existing suggestions. And, well, this much should be obvious, I suppose. But what I'm really trying to say, what I want to get at is you should just feel free to broaden your horizons with your existing triggers, with your existing suggestions. So often do I see triggers put in place and not expanded upon from there on. A trigger has its purpose, yes, but why don't you play with it? Why don't you see what else can happen with it? Suggest I have a subject who identifies as a puppet. Yes, simple enough. They are puppets on strings. Let's say strings is the trigger. And these strings kind of bind their body, make them make them unable to move of their own free will, of their own volition. They stay perfectly still and only move in the way that their puppet controlling person wills them. What then happens if I were to take a pair of scissors to these strings? And there are multiple ways to approach this question, to approach this problem. There's two major ways. You can either leave it up to interpretation, or you can expand upon the trigger yourself as a hypnotist and mandate what happens. And I've always been a fan of exploring triggers through the lens of the sub. Give them a command and see how it's interpreted. I think that is really one of the great joys of hypnosis, to see how somebody interprets suggestion, interprets command that they wouldn't usually run into in their day-to-day life. So what happens in my sub's brain once I am holding a pair of scissors, just like I am right now? That's the sound of a scissor snip, and a scissor accidentally banging into the microphone. Apologies about that. What happens when their strings get cut? Does that mean that they're free? Or does that mean that they just fall, loose and limp, and no longer directly controlled, but also still out of control of the rest of their body? What happens when I snip their right arm, but not their left arm? If you can't tell, improvisation is kind of a very essential component to trance, to kink as a whole for me. Just get creative with it. Get funny with it. One of my all-time highlights as a hypnotist was, I was just kind of sitting at my desk. I was on a I guess it was a Zoom call at the time. Discord hadn't had its inbuilt video function yet. So I was on a Zoom call, and I was just kind of fiddling around at my desk. I've got a shelf next to my desk. I was just kind of fiddling around, reaching around, seeing what kind of fun I could have with the items I had laying around. I had a deck of cards, and what happened was I shuffled it, I sorted it, and then I just lifted the deck of cards and I flicked them down from 10 to ace, and then I just dropped the deck, and wouldn't you know it, that qualifies as a countdown to some people. But my all-time highlight was, I had a little USB, and I just plugged this USB into the forehead of one very secretive subject, and just installed a little program that made her agree that she's cute when she's told she's cute. And that was one of my highlights, and it was completely improvised. It was completely unplanned. And that's kind of the point I want to get through to you today. Have fun with it. Within the reason, within the boundaries of consent. This world is full to the brim with objects, random things that have so much untapped potential. We exist within this bizarre subcultural niche wherein, if we're creative, we can make anything mean anything. We can give any potential object this power to change minds, this power to affect thought processes, to even cause physiological responses to a certain degree. Somebody once took a scarf. They said, okay, stand against that wall, stick your arm out so that it's against this wall. I've got the scarf. And she just said, this is a stapler. And and she pressed the the scarf against my arm, against the wall. She said, "Click," pulled it away, and my arm was stapled in place. And I couldn't move it until fingers were snapped, and she said, "Release." And that's. I hope I'm not I hope I'm not labouring the point here, which is just when you get home from this convention, look in your drawers. This is your homework. Look in your drawers, look on your shelf, and just find some bizarre object. Hell, do this when you get back to your hotel room. Find one object in your hotel room, whether it started there or you brought it, something that you wouldn't typically consider hypnotic and kinky, and apply one of these principles that I've talked to you about today. Alright? Make it hypnotic through visual fixation, through substitution, through gravity and motion, or by attaching an existing suggestion to it. Alright? Can you do that? I'll take your vague sort of nodding across the audience as a yes, I can do that. Good hypnotists. You've done very well. Alright, so I've got a few minutes left of time, but that's pretty much all I'd prepped up to, so I guess let's go into a Q&A section for the last, it seems like I've got about 3 minutes left, so I think I can take about 2 questions. Yeah, I can take 1 or 2 questions depending on what's left. No? Does nobody have any questions? That is outstanding. I mean, shall I just go on a tirade about how about other bizarre hypnotic things, about other objects? Sure. Let's get really subcultural, really niche, because hypnosis is not. Well, hypnosis is never just about hypnosis. We talk about, ice cream is used for kink. And you've got vanillas, and then every other kink is some other flavour. Hypnosis has been described to me as sprinkles. It's not always, it can be a flavour on itself, but also it just makes everything else better. So just, look at your interests. Look at your subs' interests. Because there are so many. And it doesn't even need to be kink interests. It can be their regular interests, their hobbies, their favorite movies. Even I was once in a toy store with a sub, and we found a Harry Potter wand, and I just kind of waved it around a little, made the tip light up, and Imperio. The Imperious curse, the mind control curse from Harry Potter. And because they were suggestible, we had rapport, it made sense within their existing schemata of both hypnosis and, pop culture. Wouldn't you know it? It worked. Little brainwashed toy for me in the middle of a toy store. So, look at your interests. Look at everything that surrounds you. What do you know about? What does your sub know about? What do you like? Don't think about what you dislike. Of course, take it into account. But what do you both like and understand to a certain degree? For instance, everybody has a conceptual understanding of a calendar. We all know what a calendar is, right? I'd be a bit scared if any of you didn't. So how about brainwashing exercise? Take a calendar, and just as you trance them, as you go through your basic, whatever form of brainwashing, conditioning you so prefer, just start marking off days of the calendar and turning around and saying, you've been conditioned for this many days. and make it seem as though time is passing and they've been under for such an exceptionally long time. And you'll find that even though they haven't been under that time, the brain can find ways to rationalize. The brain can find brilliant ways to rationalize that passage of time in terms of effects on them. They might know what being under for a half hour feels like, so then it can be extrapolated outwards. Does that make sense? Cool. Seeing as there's no questions, and I appear to have reached my time limit, thank you for coming to my not TED talk. I hope you have a wonderful day. Study hard, do your homework, and if anyone wants to buy me a drink, I will be at the bar. See you around, everyone.